So you can have more than one method within a class. The examples we looked at previously just had one main and it did a bunch of statements and then it completed. But a class can have more than one method. In fact, normally they do, because that makes the code more readable and it makes it more organized. So examples of some methods that are already provided for you are some of the math methods. You could take a square root of something. There's no operator to do a square root, but you can do the math.square-root function. I think we talked about the pi one already. The sine function, you convert to radians. Sine, cosine, and tangent that we're used to in geometry usually takes degrees as an argument. But in Java, in the math library, it expects radians, so there's a way to convert to radians. Remember when we sometimes assign a decimal to an integer, it doesn't round, it truncates. I mean, it just cuts off the decimal. But there is a way to round. There's a round function which rounds as you'd expect. This website gives a lot of the math functions that you could take a look at, and they're interesting. You're familiar with most of them. And actually Oracle, I don't know if we talked about this, but Oracle owns Java right now, so they keep up a lot of the documentation and they make a lot of changes to the language. So we'll look at some examples of these in code. We just mentioned a class can have more than one method. There are a lot of good reasons for that. It just makes the code more readable. It eliminates repetitive code. If you want to take a sine function, instead of writing the code to do the sine every time, you can just call this method that's been already defined. Let's see. If you're accessing a method that you defined within your own class, it's your own method, you do not need that class dot prefix. Like up here, this sine function, or 2 radians, is defined in the math class. So that's why when we're accessing it from our own code, we have to put math dot, because it's to tell Java it's in the math class, and we want the function sine. But if it's our own, we don't need to worry about that. We could just call them the method. We already talked about how they're named by convention. Class names upper camel case, method names lower camel case. So it starts with lowercase letter, starts with uppercase. So that's pretty much all you need to know about methods. It's better to look at examples, but the biggest thing is that you break a problem down into subtasks by using more than one method. When you're trying to design a bigger project, you want to first figure out, well, what do I need to do this? What different tasks do I need to complete? So you start at the higher level and you break each task down into smaller tasks, and pretty soon you'll see what the methods are that you're going to need for this program. And if you define the method signature, meaning what arguments are used, which we'll talk about in the next lesson, and what return values and so on, then you can even easily hand off code to other people to do, as long as they do what you tell them to in that method, and as long as they take the same input and give you the correct output that you want. So it's really a good way to help you break down a problem into subtasks, even if you have to distribute those tasks over to other people that are coding. The flow of execution, when you're reading a Java program, normally in a class, well, first of all, there will only be one main in each Java program. There may be more than one file, and each class will be in its own file, but there's only one main, and the execution always starts at the beginning of the main method, and it ends at the last statement in the main method. So they're executed one at a time, like we've been seeing sequentially, until you get to a method. And when it gets to the method call, it then goes into that method call. So you might jump around in the code, and now you're starting to go sequentially in that method until you get to the end of that method. Then you go back to where you called the method from and continue from there. So we'll look at an example of that as well. The end of the method is where you'd return. That's where the method ends. Either you fall off the end, there's no more statements, or there might be a return statement somewhere in there. But again, when you're done with a method, you return to the statement right after where you actually called the method. So basically, you don't read a program from top to bottom. You follow its flow of execution starting at main. The first Java program example that we'll look at is called methods, and all I do here is show you how you would use a bunch of these math methods within a Java program. So the class is called methods. The first method within my program is actually my main method. And in my main method, I just do a couple of assignment values. I'm assigning root to be the square root of 17, and so on. I'm assigning the sine of this angle. Remember, this is in radians, to height, and so on. Let's see what else is in here. And then I'm going to do a few things. The only thing I'm actually going to do that I print out, just so we can see what it is, the power function, it just takes 2 to the 10th power, and then I'm going to print it out. So remember, when I print it out, this, if I use printf, I can print out this string, and then this is the formatting string. It says print out a float with 1 digit after the decimal. One thing to keep in mind, we did not need an import statement. We did not need to import the math library class because it's already part of the Java language. It's so commonly used. So let's see what happens when we run this. It should give me what 2 to the 10th power is. So I run it. I see just what I expected. 2 to the 10th power is, and it's 1024. That's correct. That's what it is. It printed out 1 decimal place because that's what I told it to. So now we'll take we'll take a look at another method. These methods are called within the class newline, but these are our own methods that we defined. So the execution of the class, program execution, starts at main. So the first thing this program should do, remember I didn't start execution here. I see those and I see that what they do. This just prints out a new line. This prints out 3 new lines by calling this function or this method 3 times. But all it does here is first I print out the words first line. I should skip 3 lines, and then I should print out second line. So when I get to this function, and by the way, sometimes I call these functions. They're actually called methods in Java. Methods and functions are really the same thing, but Java uses the terminology method, and every other programming language in the world practically uses the word function. So sometimes if I say function instead of method, I really mean the same thing. So just keep that in mind. So what happens here, I begin execution, print out first line, I call 3 line. So now I'm going to jump up here. And I'll start execution at the first statement in 3 line, which basically says jump to new line. Now I'm going to jump up here, print out my 1 new line, then I'll return here. Now it says to do the same thing again. It says now enter new line again. So I go up here, I print out a new line, I return right here. So I'm going to start execution right here now. But that says call a different method. I'm sorry, it's the same method, but the 3rd time I'm calling it. Jump up here again, print out new line, return here. I fall off the end. There's nothing else here. So remember, when you come to the last statement in a method, or if you come to a return statement, you're done with the method. After I do that, I just called this. My point of execution where I return in main will be at the beginning of this statement, which says print out second line, the word second line, and then I fall off the end. There's nothing left to do in the main method, so I'm done. So let's see what happens when we run it. And just as expected, prints out first line, 3 blank lines. Those are the 3 new lines right here, done by this method. And then I print out second line, and I'm done.